I'm Gwen Preston of Resource Maven. We're here at the Metals Investor Forum in Vancouver in November, and I'm joined by Peter Akerley of Erdene Resource Development. You guys should really shorten that name. It has like an extra word in it.
You should.
Yeah.
Yes.
ERD is the symbol. Erdene's a Mongolian explorer. I know the company pretty well. I was lucky enough to go and visit the projects in May. A really interesting week in the Gobi Desert. So let's just sort of paint the picture a bit here. The most important, fundamental to me in the Erdene story is your longevity, your team's longevity in Mongolia.
Yeah. So it's been 20 years, Gwen, since I first went to Mongolia in 1997, that first wave of explorers that went into the country. And it was brand new. It was opening up from the socialist period, and it was the first wave of explorers. And we ran the largest ever regional exploration program in the country at that time. It was 5 million hectares, 100 Mongolian geologists, and it was the best Country 101 course a person could hope for.
Right.
And it gave me an opportunity to see not only some fantastic geologic belts, get to know the people, understand the need for foreign investment, and see the growth in China next door. And those combination of elements led me to say, this would be a great place for me to start my own company. Unfortunately, that was 1998, so we're going into that nuclear winter of resource investing, which started to come back to life when Robert Freeland hit the first deep hole at Oyu in July of 2001. And that was the impetus for me to sort of jump into it, and we went public a few years later, but began the process in 2002. And since 2004, I've been the most consistently active regional explorer, which has led us down this pipeline to what we think is the best unexplored belt in the country, and now starting to generate some really exciting new gold discoveries.
Right. So a bunch of aspects of that are really interesting. One of them is this wave of exploration that came up. Mongolia actually has a pretty robust mining sector. It's got a lot of really good geologists that have come out of that, and you know a lot of them from having been there for so long.
Right.
These projects. So now you're focused. The focus is on 2.5 projects that are within a small area, within about 15 kilometers of each other. Bayan Hundi is the one that is attracting the most attention.
Right.
It certainly produced some very splashy, it has produced some very splashy grades, especially in the central core of the deposit where it looks like 3-4 gram average, better. And then there's a bigger halo. So this is where you're trying to tie together a resource at Bayan Hundi. Let's talk about what the exploration and resource potential is there.
Sure. So we went into this year really not fully understanding the scope or the size of this system. We had concentrated on where the mineralization came to surface. And it was only in January of this year that we started to understand the potential as it went out undercover.
Right.
And so this year, the initial half of this year was pushing that undercover mineralization, which is now stretched out over about 1.2 kilometers. Once we had that kind of understood, we began to step out on either side of it, and we now have a system that's roughly 1.2 kilometers by 400 meters, which is double the size of what it was at the start of the year. Our target going into this year, when we thought about, okay, how many ounces could we potentially target to drill off between Bayan Hundi and Altan Nar, was around 1.5 million ounces of over a gram type material. So that is a target I believe we're getting close to. We'll see when we do the resource next year. But the real sweet spot of this, as you commented on, is the grades. So within the core of Bayan Hundi, our target would be in the range of several 100,000 ounces of 4 gram plus type material. And that's sitting at surface in some ultra high grade pockets. This is just the beginning of exploration in what we believe is a new district. And so you have Bayan Hundi in the southern part of one license. 16 kilometers north, you have another deposit that looks to have a 1 million ounce potential at Altan Nar. So it's a really exciting sort of start to what is literally one of the first new district discoveries globally in the gold industry in many years.
Right, and when you talk about sort of the uniqueness of this discovery in the global gold picture, I mean, you've got high-grade gold at surface with scale in an area where infrastructure is much less of a challenge, I think, than people might assume.
I think that's a good point. Yeah.
There's a lot of coal mines in the area.
That's right. So when I arrived in 1997, I think it was fair to say Mongolia was remote and infrastructurally challenged. There's no question. But in the first 5 years or so when I was there, the Chinese built a railway to the border 200 kilometers from where our projects are today. That was a 400-kilometer railway built in about 15 months, almost unheard of in North America or in Western countries. Since that time, there's now 3 railways built to that border crossing. There's blacktop highways across the border to the coal district that you just mentioned. 3, 4 major coal mines. So we now have access to people, to services, the ability to bring in plant and equipment. So it's really not that different from being 200 kilometers north of Kirkland Lake or Timmins, really, when you think about it in that perspective.
Absolutely. And then, so Altan Nar, which we just mentioned, is the project that's 16 kilometers away from Bayan Khundii. Really, it was your original discovery area. It's polymetallic, probably a carbonate-based metal epithermal system that you're sort of just returning to after it hasn't gotten a lot of attention in a few years.
That's right. So in 2011, we made the first discovery at Altan Nar, gold polymetallic system, and it was only during that period of sort of that 4 years from discovery, 2011 to 2015, it was very difficult to raise money for exploration. So we did what we could, raised a little bit, but we did establish 18 separate targets along a 6-kilometer trend, extremely well mineralized. Because we had interest in investors supporting a small-scale mine, we did a small resource at that time. So there was 250,000 ounces of over 2-gram gold equivalent material drilled off in the shallow portions of 2 of those 18 targets. It was at that point that we released that resource estimate that the markets began to pay a little bit more attention to gold, as we were just picking up 4,000 gram samples at surface at Bayan Khundii. So obviously that attracted a lot of attention from the market and from us, and we shifted our focus there. And periodically have enhanced size and grade at Altan Nar, but it deserves a tremendous amount of work in the future while we've concentrated on Bayan Khundii. So between the two, I see a 1 million ounce potential at both, and that's just within those two sort of footprints, but tremendous district scale potential.
Right, I know one of the lines that you often use is it's unlikely that you have discovered the only 2 sort of zones of mineralization in this large prospective and unexplored terrain, for sure. And in that, you also have this western part of the country where you've been doing regional scale copper exploration in a strategic alliance with Teck for many years.
Yes. So this started back in actually about 2006 when we purchased from Mohammed Al Fayed of Harrods Department Store fame the Zun Mod prospect. It had 8 holes in it. We drilled it off and took it to a deposit, which is today a major molybdenum copper porphyry target. That kind of gave us that ammunition to know, okay, we're into a new porphyry district, epithermal district, but there hadn't been epithermal gold discoveries of merit. Nonetheless, we decided to really focus a regional exploration program across this entire fertile terrain, 400 kilometers long, and invested millions and millions of dollars in that. So our knowledge base and our proprietary database is second to none in that district. And you know, we've been patient for 20 years in Mongolia to get to this point. We'll remain patient. We'll continue to add, continue to explore. And I think the potential, as you said, we think we're a great geologic team, but the likelihood that we found the only 2 deposits poking through the surface of the earth is very unlikely.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, when people ask me about Erdene, I certainly talk about Bayan Khundii, I talk about Altan Nar. These are the near-term foci. The market is really focused on these assets, but I think there's a lot going on in the background, a lot of regional prospectivity here that we don't know what it might turn up, but odds are something. Yeah,
you know, we've done a lot of work with fertility, we've done a lot of work with some of our major partners, and we're highly confident that we're in a very fertile part of the arc. Not only do we have the gold project we talked about and the porphyry at Zun Mod, but there's another 8 projects that we found that are porphyry, intermediate sulfidation, low sulfidation. There's high sulfidation in the neighborhood. It's just one of those places where you've had a tremendous amount of hot fluids come through, metalliferous hot fluids, and it's an exciting new district.
Absolutely, and one that hasn't seen a lot of work, except for by Erdene.
Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. Thanks for watching.